Welcome everyone to another episode of the Elemental Awakening. I'm Gio, and today I have a very special guest, Kyle Kingsbury. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Gio.
Yeah, of course. Kyle is a very interesting guy. Came across my path when I heard I was getting into high-dose psilocybin, and someone had mentioned you have to check out this guy, Kyle. He just did a very high-dose psilocybin, which was something that I've been looking towards. On top of that, he's an MMA fighter. I was fighting in the UFC. He does amazing work in some men's group and coaching groups, and just all around really interesting guy. So I'm excited about this conversation. Could go in a few different ways, but you guys stay tuned. This is gonna be an awesome conversation. So I guess, Kyle, for those who don't know who you are, give me a little background. Who's Kyle Kingsbury, and how did you get into like podcasting, what you're doing today, sharing about all the things that you share?
I will try to nugget this into bullet points as fast as possible, so we can get the juicy shit and rather than the background. But let's see. I played football since I was 10. Finished at Arizona State. Went through a pretty deep period of depression and a lot of pharmaceuticals and Western medicine. Fighting, found MMA as a way to give me purpose and team camaraderie. And didn't know that it would last long, but it ended up taking me to the UFC, where I fought for 6 years. And along the way, had a boxing coach of Native American and Mayan descent who would take me out for traditional sweat lodges, and then eventually working with plant medicines with respect and reverence. And that just cracked me wide open, And since then, thanks to some of those trips, I've just really followed my passion, and not worried about what I was going to be when I grew up and how I was going to earn money. And in doing so, just continue to follow my intuition and follow my nose to the things that I love, the things that are of interest to me, which was a lot about optimization when I was fighting, and then longevity, and now much more on the mental, emotional, and spiritual side. And, I consider myself a lifelong learner. I'm a student before I'm a teacher always. And that's led me to some cool spots. Got on Rogan's a couple of times. He put the pressure to have me start a podcast, and then podcast over the years has really taken some big leaps. Made it to Onnit, worked there for 3 years. Aubrey Marcus is my dear brother, one of my best friends. I work with him in Fit for Service, as you mentioned. And, we're coaching people on all levels: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And that, as a coach, really continues to light the fire for me to want to grow and learn, aside from all the other reasons to want to grow and learn. Right. So,
Absolutely.
there's so many driving factors in the world. Just look around you. Right. But even
Absolutely.
internally, there's plenty of good reasons to want to learn and grow and continue that process. And that's really what I'm doing. I'm reading a lot. I'm practicing. I'm jumping into medicine experiences, and I'm playing in the upper regions or the further pushes, to really see, to really explore for myself, I guess what the deep water looks like, and then taking, those extractions and diluting them and processing and sending it back out to the people. Really just a way of sharing my experience with the world, and not prescriptive at all, as I'm sure we'll mention when we talk relationship, not prescriptive at all for other people. And certainly with high dose medicine, not prescriptive. No one size fits all approach to anything in life, but I think there is value in seeing people really get to those outer edges and what's possible.
Awesome. So, let's talk a bit about the higher dose stuff, because I want to dive right into that. There's a lot of areas I wanted to ask you questions about. Your journey with I think it was 30 grams of penis envy, and for those listening, I highly recommend not to start anywhere in those ranges, and I'm sure you might attest to that. How does one get into those kind of, like, what pushes you to that? You seem like an extreme guy, like anyone that's into like MMA at that level, pushing yourself. How did that sort of transition happen, I guess, from the initial sort of introduction to like plant medicine to getting to that type of exploration? You want to tell me a bit about that journey and how that changed your life or impacted you?
Yeah. First, let me start, as you said, caveat, disclaimer, all that shit. The guy I learned it from, Kalindi Ai, who I think you've podcasted with him, correct?
I haven't podcasted with him. When I found out about him this year, I just like, when I was hearing you talk about like hearing about him and wanting to get him on the show, did you end up talking to him?
No, he passed away before I got him on.
Same thing. And A guy that I've sort of connected with, James Gesso, who you'd probably want to get on his podcast, at Mind, Adventures Through the Mind. He had a podcast that someone sent to me. And then as soon as I heard him speak, like it mirrored yours. At first I was like, I don't know about this guy. And then you just hear he's got this presence. I was like, okay, now I'm curious.
Yeah. So
yeah,
let me dive into that.
Yeah.
That's we're like a Tarantino movie. We're starting with the end first and then working our way back.
Yeah.
I had a couple of experimental young trips on alcohol and no reverence, no respect, no intention, no sacred container, none of that. Wouldn't even call them ceremonies, just experiences. And then when I started working with my coach, he wasn't a guy that beat around the bush. Like there's even among sweat lodges, there's warrior sweats and there's, public sweats for everyday white people, I guess you'd say.
Cowboy sweats.
And like we would get in there and go hard, and he pushed me not only in the gym, but he pushed my mind. He stretched me in many ways. And I mean, just to put it plainly, my wife's first experience, who's 115 pounds, we split an ounce of golden teacher in the sweat lodge. And, it was a phenomenal experience, full moon on the reservation. Few things compared to those early journeys, but and to be clear, I've microdosed for months at a time, every fourth day, Fadiman protocol. I've done a lot of playing on the low end as well as the high end too. And I find value in all of it. But when I had first heard about penis envy mushrooms, being 2, maybe 3x any of your basic organically grown mushrooms, I was like, wow, all right, I'm in. And I didn't know really where to start. I'd had, 5, 7, 10, 14 gram journeys with your standard mushrooms, and they were all incredible. Some challenging experiences, but nothing that took me to like ayahuasca level. And the first time we had penis envy, we were like, why play small? Let's see what the 5 gram journey is with penis envy. And it was like a DMT ride for a few hours. It was incredibly deep and beautiful and highly visual. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. We've got that there. And then, over time working with that at that dose, there was so much familiarity. There was never a point where I felt like, holy shit, I got to buckle up, and for a lot of people, it's totally fine to stay at that range. But for me, it's not even necessarily chasing novelty. It's just the fact that I get the most downloads when I can't steer the ship. I get the most benefit when there's almost a forced hand of surrender. And ayahuasca does that amazingly. For me in particular, the higher dose psilocybin does that without question. Like if I find myself in a spot where all I can do is lay back and breathe, or do some, if I'm real tight and tense, like I'll hit a little yoga and then lay back down or sit up. But that's pretty much the territory I like to play in. And I had gone up to 7 grams of penis envy and it was phenomenal. And then, some time had passed and I was working with ayahuasca again. And I asked, ayahuasca, as you know, it might sound weird, but I'm sure your listeners have experienced this. You can speak to these plant medicines like you're talking to someone, like you're talking to a being. And you might hear a voice back, or you might just have the knowing within, but it's a form of consciousness that's highly intelligent, and it is aware. It is aware of you. It knows you're there. It knows it's working within you, and you can receive information that way. And so I had asked ayahuasca, it's going to be a while before I make it back to the Amazon. How can I continue to work in this space? And it showed me this golden mushroom with like a pure black background sprout up. And I was like, oh, dope. Aya's green lighting me to work with psilocybin. And I said, what doses? And it showed me 7, 10, and then 14. So it was showing me that I incrementally jump. And again, this is personal. This is not a one size fits all. Don't go 7, 10, 14 with penis envy. Wait and see what your downloads are. But for me, that's what it was. And the reason I never took that trajectory was because every time we had the opportunity to drop in, there was no one really at the helm. And I don't consider myself a black belt in medicine. I'm not a curandero or a medicine man by any means, not yet at least. And, but at the same time, I have enough equivalency to be a good sitter. And so in those experiences, I would never push the envelope because I was always the person who had the most experience. And so that led me to never really climbing the ladder, as ayahuasca had mentioned. And then over time, there was a member from Fit for Service who was getting ready to do her first 5-gram journey. And she, sent me a YouTube video. And she's like, you ever heard of this? 20 to 30 grams? And my immediate response was, this guy's a fucking quack. No one does that.
Right.
And I watched the video, like something in me kind of intuited, like, no, I need to watch this. And just like you said, the first 5 minutes I'm watching Kalindi speak and I'm like, oh, this dude's more grounded than half the people I meet in an ayahuasca circle, and he has a wealth of knowledge and he has decades of doing this. It's not like he just dipped his feet in. It's not like me telling you about the 30-gram experience. Like, he actually has a lot of experience doing it, and he's still very well spoken and very well put together. And he really had a, lifelong martial artist, but a beautiful knowledge on the history of plant medicines in Africa. And I found that fascinating. One of the key things that he was saying is that ayahuasca and iboga, they're incredible medicines, but they all have rate limiting factors, right? Too much iboga can kill you. Too much ayahuasca, you can purge and shit your brains out for days on end and need an IV, right? Like, you can go too far with those medicines, but that doesn't seem to be the case with psilocybin. And, he goes much deeper into that. He talks about the birth of the whole Marvel universe from the guys in the 70s, doing high dose psilocybin and acid in an apartment in New York City. And that birthed like the Infinity Wars and Avengers and the whole Marvel universe, like really cool, fascinating stuff. And anybody who's seen Doctor Strange, you're like, these guys were for sure dropping in. There's no question. And then of course, you get the nod from Stan Lee in that movie where he's reading The Doors of Perception in his cameo laughing, right? And it's like, to those who know, you're immediately confirmed, right?
Yeah, you can see it. You pick up on that stuff.
After that, I had purchased penis envy and had microdosed with it, but didn't have the same results as microdosing previously. I actually did it in a fight with Jason Ellis. And I didn't have the same flow. And I was like, this can't be penis envy. And so I decided, if it's not penis envy, I can do the 30 grams of that. Because if it was penis envy, I probably wouldn't have done it, And I ended up doing the 30 grams and I had fasted the whole day, ground them up. And it was 3.5 hours of the deepest experience I've ever had in my life by far. I mean, there was halfway through, it felt like I had taken a fresh hit of 5-MeO and held it as long as I could. Like, literally like nothing else. By far the most challenging experience I've ever had, like a personal hell for eternity. And, time makes no sense there. So, I mean, I spent eternity in hell and still one of probably the most valuable experience I've ever had. And I didn't really understand it was penis envy until I backtracked on another journey with 10 grams. And I was like, this is for sure penis envy. And of course, that was an incredible, beautiful ride that likely would have put me in the standard 20 to 30 grams that Kalindi's talking about in his videos,
on the 10 grams,
3x on the 10 grams of penis envy. That's probably 20 to 30 of the mushrooms, he's into. So, that's pretty much where I get into there, and we can dive deeper into that experience. Behind that.
Yeah, I love that. It's a beautiful sort of progression, I guess, kind of quick, more like an exponential. But when I had one of my deeper experiences, I had this vision of a hunter-gatherer being really hungry and finding a patch of penis envy. And it was showing me, like, how much do you think someone who's really hungry that stumbles across this would eat? They'd probably eat enough to fill themselves up. And then it's like, boom, instant, like, consciousness expansion. Imagine like the surprise where it's like, I'm dead, like I died. And then you just like in hell and you come back. And it's okay, maybe that's the way these were meant to be consumed. Like no one in the natural world, unless you know and you figure it out eventually, because, you through trial and error, you're going to start realizing, okay, there's something here, and a tradition over hundreds of thousands of years gets formed. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's like pedal to the metal, like dive right in? Like now we have knowledge, but those who have gone there, like you said, the most impactful experience of your life. And, one of my teachers once told me, nature rewards courage. And I think that's what also Terrence McKenna also said something similar. When you have the courage to go into the darkness and you face whatever fear or scary shit comes up and you can break through it or get to the bottom of it, the other end is like, this beautiful, like, nirvana or whatever you want to call it. It's just like the come through is amazing. So what are your thoughts on that and seeking that darkness to find the light, or challenging yourself to that point? Because all the things you mentioned, half an ounce in a sauna, that sounds like super intense. But are you like the masochist version, or like going for the breakthrough and finding like what's on the other side? Yeah. What do you have
Well,
to say around those kind of things?
it's definitely, for me, it's not I mean, there's people who want to punish themselves in every walk of life, even looking into like ultra endurance runners and things like that. And that's not universal across the board. I'm not trying to shit on a particular type of people, but there generally is something in them that makes them want to push a little further. And sometimes that's pain. For me, that's definitely not the case now. That might've been the case when I was fighting, but, it truly is just like, I know what lies on the other end of that. And it's pure bliss and beauty. And it's funny because I had written all these things down for my intention and spoken them and drummed in and done a lot of practices that I've been taught over the years to create resonance and to really speak that into the word, like to call it from the astral and bring it into reality. And the final thing on there was rebirth. And I just finished reading the DMT dialogues, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners have read. It's fantastic. One of the biggest takeaways that I got in that book, because it's all about DMT entities, is when you come up against darkness or, the devil himself or any of these aspects of God, it is just that. It is an aspect of God. And when we move past duality, we're looking at a part of the whole. And it doesn't mean there's not darkness or dark energy in the world. It just means that is a part of this greater awareness that is love. And in that, it's there to teach you something. So, and of course in DMT, when you say no, you have that option usually, like Graham Hancock mentions, you get snapped back to reality and you're like, damn it, I should have said yes, because now there's no more fear. You can return to your body. You're like, oh man, I lost out on all that potential information and knowledge and wisdom. And so having just finished that, when I got in my 30-gram experience, it was pure love. It was divine love. It was, 1,000 pills of MDMA. I mean, it was just pure bliss. Every cell of my body vibrating like 5-MeO, like incredible. And I went through my entire family with love and reverence. I saw my son's soul rather than as this, typical kid who has all these needs and wants and desires and pushes against me at every turn. I got to see him as my teacher, and not just as on paper, but to really feel that like this kid is here to teach me. And his soul, for all I know, has had many more lifetimes than mine. And he is my teacher. He's my guru, and to really held him with reverence, all beautiful. And I have this, this mandala and Kalindi talks about it. It was on the wall of the place that I was at, and it started spinning out towards me. And Kalindi talks about these two-dimensional places that exist in 3D reality, and everything in the multiverse is holographic. So you can access that through you, because as above, so below, everything is within you, right? Like Rumi said, you're not a drop in the ocean, you're the entire ocean in a drop. So if it is fractal, and it does work that way, all these access points are here, and we're basically using high-dose psilocybin as a tool to go anywhere. But as this thing spun out at me, it started to worm up my body, and I looked, and it separated the entire room. And in the room, I'm looking at beings with eyes wide open. Like I've never come across entities on DMT. Now eyes are open. I'm rubbing them and they're there in the room, and they're there for me. I'm like, are you guys cool, or is this not good? I mean, what's going on? And again, this is way out there. This is probably one of the most out there trips I've ever had, but they touch me and I'd feel like this ball of love and energy move through my body wherever they touched. And I was like, all right, cool. These guys got my back. Cause it was a solo journey. I was a little nervous about that. But as this wormhole opens, I'm watching it, and it's like the outer edge of a glass of water. You can see it separate itself from the rest of the room. And I'm looking down on my chest. There's a circle sitting on my chest, and in it is pitch black. And I'm like, oh, this is the darkness. Can I go there? Oh, of course I can't, but do I want to go there into the darkness? And having just read that book, the answer was unequivocally yes. Like, okay, let's do it. And I didn't remember saying yes. I didn't remember willfully going, and maybe I would have gone there no matter what. But that, to me, coming out of that experience is always something that highlights the experience, because it was my free will that chose, let's head in there. And when I speak of hell, I mean, it's not your generic hell. I don't think hell is ever a generic hell. There's no guy dancing around with a hot poker. It's not Little Nicky where they're shoving pineapples in Hitler's ass. Like, it has nothing to do with that. It's highly personal. And every layer went through super conscious fears that I had, like things that I know and I would admit, before we had this child, my wife and I experienced a miscarriage. And so the first layer of hell was me witnessing her miscarry and blaming me for it.
Mm.
And it just went on repeat, on a repeated loop. I would drink the 30 grams. I would go on, I would start talking to people. I could communicate telepathically with all my health and wellness people that I've learned through over the years, and just like, yeah, the babies are doing good, and everything's set. And then, I think there's a problem. We need help, and then some time would go by, and then, red lights would flash, and I'd be like, trying to get a hold of everyone. Like, we got to go to the ER, and I'd run downstairs and see her, and then boom, she just explodes. And it's viscerally, disgusting and graphic. And I relived that infinitely until I caught the loop and finally actually surrendered to it. And it unpacked so many of these things, these fears that were operating within me, all the way to very subtle things that I don't think about on a day-to-day. Like, if we're in a machine and this is, what's the word here? If it's simulation theory, and simulation theory minus a God, minus an omniscient presence, and that every experience I've had with psychedelics confirming that presence is complete bullshit. And that was written into the code. And me taking 30 grams cracked the code, and now we're stuck on this infinite loop. Shit like that, like stuff that I'm not even aware of. But like, yeah, if there's no God, that would be a pretty fucked scenario for me, to put it plainly. And I could admit that I don't want to believe in a world with God. I can say that very, very, very plainly, because I feel like I have experienced that directly. But even if I hadn't, I would not want to believe in a world that just, you go black when it ends. So maybe that does direct my experience, maybe not, doesn't matter to me, but that was shown to me as an actual fear. And all the way to the microdosing of hell, where I heard, a refrigerator buzzing by my ear, and all these sounds that I'm kind of like, I don't like to fucking hear that, and I turned away from it, and a flashlight was shining in my eyes. And it was like every little thing that bothers me shown on repeat, as like, this is where I'm in resistance. So, as I came out of that, it was like the ultimate report card. This is what I'm holding. These are the things that I'm carrying that are not in my purview. They're not at the forefront of my mind. It's not like I'm walking around here holding my fingers crossed, like, please, let's keep this baby. Please, let's keep this. It's none of that. But all in the background, that noise is still lingering. And no experience has ever snuffed that out of me. No experience has ever brought that out of me. And, when it wore off, it was like midnight. I just come back like, holy shit. And I'm in, I'm alive. All right, let's figure this out. And I still felt dead. I took a cold shower, didn't feel anything. Ended up looking at a photo of my son on the phone, and it was like, oh, there you are. And then I remembered the whole first half of this, or first quarter, whatever it was, of that experience, which was divine love. And that reset me. And then I looked back on my intentions, and I saw rebirth. And it was like the ultimate rebirth. What do I want to do now?
Yeah, it's pretty wild how sometimes you can't piece together what it means until you look at your intention, and then it all completely makes sense. Like, and then it's like, oh, this is exactly what I asked for. And how does like asking for this communicate with this plant and then create an experience like that? That totally blows my mind. So when you're in these loops, that's a very similar experience to mine. When I did the high dose, I did about 8 grams penis envy, 8 grams of golden teachers combined, just to try to push myself to the limit. And I had a hard time remembering when I came back the specifics of the experience, but there were some loops that were sort of undeniably loopy that I broke free from. In the moment, I had these great ahas, but coming back, I was just like, that makes no, like, I can't remember exactly what was going on. So specifically speaking towards the loops, like, what do you think the intention of it is? And did you notice like something that happened when you would break free of it? Was it like a realization? Was it like, hey, I'm going to accept that it's a possibility that there is darkness when I die and there's nothing there. And when I'm okay with that, then like the loop say, okay, we've gone, like, what can you put any words to it? I know this might be challenging too.
Yeah. No, I mean, my takeaway from the loops is that you don't get past, I mean, that was the last conscious thought that I had in the first stage of hell. There was five stages that I can recall, and I wrote them down. It was that you don't get out of here without true surrender. And immediately I'm like, I surrender. I'm sorry for taking this much. I won't do it again. Like all the begging and the pleading. And then I truly surrender. And it's like, no, dude, you're going to keep witnessing this. You're going to keep living it and experiencing it. And it's not like I was watching a movie. I mean, like, it's a visceral feel. I could feel blood splatter on my face. Like it's the virtual reality will never compete with that. Like it was that real. And
maybe this is the original virtual reality where like
yeah,
we created this technology that, you know, it's such an interface. It blows my mind from like a plant.
We can talk about synergy as well. Like Dennis McKenna says, like, this is not a mistake that these tools are here. It's not by happenstance. It's not by chance of evolution. It's by design, in my opinion. But with all that, you know, the loop, I was talking to Duncan Trussell and I was telling him this story, and he goes, oh yeah, that's like Dante's Inferno. And I was like, I've never read it. And he goes, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. That was his recommendation for hell. You have to abandon all hope to get through it. That is the complete, true, utter surrender, right? Like when you're like, fine, I'm fucking stuck here forever. Cool. And you actually are cool with it. And it's not just, you know, lip service. That's when I'd move to the next stage. And so there wasn't a takeaway in the moment of, oh, okay, you know, if we don't have another child, we have Bear, that's great. Like all that came along after it. It was just, let's start the next loop. And I'd realize like, oh, cool, I'm in a new place, and complete forgetting of the place that I'm in is not a fun place. It's like, oh, thank God we're in a new place. And that new place sucked just as bad. It was just as hard to live through on a different way, on a different level. And, you know, I think that major takeaway through all of those in writing them down and unpacking them is, again, like what is operating within me all the time that's affecting the way I behave. It's affecting the way I communicate. It's affecting the decisions that I make. What am I carrying? What baggage is on my person at all times? That was all there. And I know that as a person, as a human being, especially living in times like this, we just collect more. I collect more. I've collected more. And I think it's not an experience I want to do regularly, certainly not. But, you know, once a year, twice a year, solstice, something like that, equinox, there's an opportunity there for me to really clear myself by doing the work. And I can do the work in the ceremony and have to do the work post ceremony. You know, I have to ground that experience and really make it matter. But I mean, it's the fact that I appreciate work in the ceremony just as much as I do as integration and actually putting, you know, my feet to the ground afterward.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I like to preach is that, you know, your life is a ceremony, and the psychedelics are a tool as part of your ceremony to point you back at yourself. And some people look at the psychedelics as the answer, and they keep going back time and time, and they come back to their everyday life and they just already have their next ceremony planned, because without that ceremony, they can't escape what the real work is in life. And it's just like, use that, and you have to make the changes. You have to use the insights, the teachings, the fears, because I think it's just bringing up these deep subconscious programs, and it's showing you in a way that's most impactful to you. And like, you know, a lot of us that have kids, what's the most effective way to teach a child? You know, one of them is showing them compassion and love and leading by example. The other one is through fear, you know? And unfortunately, many of us only got shown the fear side of it, like fearing our parents, fearing getting in trouble. And so that made some certain programs where we learn the most by fear, you know? But then after, we also learn from the other side of the coin is the psychedelics show you that love and compassion once you've gone through it, which I think I didn't get as much in my childhood. Because my dad and my mom was very compassionate, but they didn't know how to really be affectionate. They never got that. But just to change that into a question, I guess, in those moments of fear, you know, you talked about entities and beings. Like, although I have experienced them, I'm still kind of skeptical. Are those external from my sort of experience, or is that something that the plant is making up in my mind to have an impact on me? As like, is there another being there? You know, and then some people will put a lot of weight on that, saying, oh, I have an entity in me, so I take away my power because something entered me or something's drawing my energy. And so like, I don't like to buy into that. It's like, okay, now it's like, you got to sort of step into your own power and be like unfuckwithable and show your light and say, okay, I'm not afraid of this entity. And I think, you know, I'm not sure what I believe, if there's an actual entity or if it's part of your mind that's sort of like robbing your own energy. Like, anything you can speak on that sort of like?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can split the conversation into you know, sub conversations. One, what you're addressing is, you know, can is possession possible? Is, another entity entering into your space and your body and taking control over you possible? That's a whole different rabbit hole. I think the experience that I had was, visitors, and is that experience then created by the mind? I don't think for one second that any experience that I have on medicine is information coming from within. Like a Richard Dawkins tries to tell Graham Hancock, like, oh, this is just all the chemistry changing. And, what you experience on DMT is simply the brain's reaction to the chemical. And unequivocally, everybody that Rick Strassman studied and anyone else would be like, no, I could never fucking imagine any of this. This is so far beyond anything I see in my waking consciousness that it is something else that exists in tandem with our perceivable world. And I've had enough experience to know that for myself. Even that said, of all the DMT experiences, never experienced entities. I felt the presence of others. Years before our daughter came to us, I was in ayahuasca and I spoke to her. It was pitch black, and I rolled down on my mat and I felt the presence of another soul. And that soul said, I'm going to be your daughter and my name will be Wolf. And I started crying and she told me about what she wants to do when she's here. And it was so reassuring to know, because that was an intention. I wanted to know when and where and what, who is this next being that's going to come to us and be a part of our lives. Could that have been made up? 100%. But there are plenty of other experiences that I've had where even on ayahuasca on a day trip, at the reservation, I could look out and see trees communicating with one another. Like what science is now proving, and what guys like Paul Stamets are now proving, that Avatar is not make-believe. That's the fucking world we live in. Like the whole fungal network is communicating like the internet. They are sharing carbon like a bank and sugar. And the trees do communicate through pheromones, through the treetops, in the canopies, as well as through the ground. Like that's all known. And, indigenous peoples knew this forever, for many thousands of years. And we're just now saying, oh, hey, science just confirmed this, big deal, publish it in Nature, no one knows about it. So as far as that knowing, I stay open. I don't like to stay fixed on things. Certainly, Kalindi could have had an influence on that, because he described beings that I saw. He described, like praying mantis-like beings that were as big as me, with eyeballs the size of softballs on both sides of their head. They were speaking in clicking noises, like I couldn't understand a fucking word they were saying. And that's why I asked, like, are you guys here for me or not? And the thing is, in the D&D dialogues, that you will run up against beings that don't give a shit that you're there. And you'll run up against beings that are like, yay, you're here. And you'll run up against beings that are like, you're not allowed to be here, and even beings that'll fuck with you. Like Rogan talks about that, and my wife had the same experience, beings like, sticking their tongue out at you. And it's like this weird devilish snake tongue and just trying to mess with you like you're a little kid. And in many ways, we are little kids. If you think of a hierarchy of consciousness, and if, Hinduism and things like that are true, and we're trying to ascend in consciousness, and there are many realities to live within, this is just but one of them. I don't think we're high up the totem pole. And if you look around us, I think that's the easiest confirmation of that. If you look out in the world, I don't think it's not a far stretch to make that assumption. All that said, these guys did not feel like a figment of my imagination. And when they touched me, I could feel that well, wherever they would touch me, like, holy shit. And it was a palpable feeling. And again, I don't have, even on 5-MeO, if I leave my eyes wide open, they're not visions like that. Like this, they were crystal clear in the room with me. So my belief on that is that they were there. My understanding is that they were there. Why? I'm not sure. Probably because it was a solo journey, but who knows? Maybe I'll experience them again the next time I go around and report back to you.
Interesting. Yeah. So I guess, like, I'm a strong believer in the power of our minds to manifest our reality. And, placebo effect talks about this. Like, do you think like the plant medicines are trying to give you this experience to create a sort of a response within the body and the mind to sort of create something, whether it's positive or negative? So if you believe that, oh, there's these entities working on me, they're fixing me, I don't know what they're doing, but they say it's cool, I'm fixing this fucking problem I have in my body. And then you come out of it, and then the mind is like, I believe I was fixed, so then it heals. Do you think the intelligence of the planet is smart enough to trick you into believing that because that's the way? But then on the flip side of that, let me just
jump in on that part real quick. So what's funny is that paradoxically, what you've just asked is, does the consciousness of this plant, right, which they are conscious, like, is this higher order of consciousness that's held in a plant or a mushroom, is that creating a fictitious storyline in my head so that my body will respond and heal itself in the way that it needs to. So in a way, you're answering the question right there. Does something exist outside of us that is intelligent, right? Like, what is an alien? An alien is to come all the way to planet Earth, you'd have to be pretty extraordinarily, at least technologically advanced, right? And so is the being in the room a figment of my imagination, or is it this thing that is actually what I think it is? Is it some form of higher intelligence that is either there for me or doesn't care or there against me? Does that actually exist? Well, if it's being created by the consciousness of this other entity, you would call I would call and Rupert Sheldrake talks about this, the collective consciousness of humanity, right? Morphic resonance. You could say ayahuasca has a morphic resonance and the collective consciousness of ayahuasca. Whatever beings inhabit that, whatever consciousness inhabits that. And it might be easier to say a consciousness than beings. There is an awareness there though. And I think people who understand that, who have done ayahuasca enough, understand the moment you sign up for a trip and start dieta to the Amazon, that medicine starts working. It's almost as if it knows you're coming to work with it. It's almost as if it knows you're starting dieta and starting to clear yourself and remove some of these other things. And maybe that's just it too. Maybe it's the practice of, removing shitty TV and bad music and some of the inputs, some of the foods that we eat and things like that, and actually getting clear that we start to perceive things differently and start to work on our attention ahead of time. In either regard, in many circumstances, it has started working ahead of time. And there are, I think anybody who spends enough time there, who's not just, I did it one time and I understand it, like a Dave Asprey or someone like that, I think you're going to have that download. You're going to have that known realization that this is a form of consciousness that is different from me, but in the same likeness as me. And I think what indigenous cultures understood is true. It doesn't mean you need to worship everything as, the houseplant god that sits in my room or the vine god that hangs downstairs. Like it doesn't need to be that. It can be that. There's nothing wrong with either way, but in animism, all things are animated with the same thing I am. Whatever soul I have is in literally everything. It's in this table. There's a brilliant book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum by Ishtak Bentov that Paul Chek refers to a lot. He has thousands of books. Also, I don't know too many people. I don't know anyone who's been down the rabbit hole as many times as him, and also has the physical structure that he does. A lot of spiritual teachers forego the necessity of the body, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but we are tuning forks, and that our tuning fork, however honed, however much resonance and alignment we create to the all consciousness, that's where we get the perception. That's where we can receive the downloads in everyday waking consciousness, as well as within these experiences. And Ishtak really dives into that. But he talks, he says the exact same thing through quantum physics. Like everything is conscious, electrons, atoms, all the way to the subatomic level and out above. Everything holds consciousness, and Native Americans believe that. Aboriginal people believe that. Everyone in the Amazon believes that. It's not something that people stumble across continent, across generation, who are living closer to the land and eating cleaner and living with purpose, and also having access to altered states of awareness that keep stumbling upon the exact same thing. And that's been my experience. Ayahuasca gifted me that knowledge. And so with that, if everything is consciousness at a certain level, I don't see it as a figment of my imagination that I'm witnessing other beings on this planet. Not even close.
Okay. Very well said. I resonate with what you just said. So what do you think the role of the darker entities then? And if, for all one, are they just playing a role to help you, or are they really malevolent dark beings that are trying to take something from you? And are you giving up something if you encounter them, or you know what I mean? What do you think that is? And have you had any experiences firsthand in your journeys? Yeah.
I mean, I have I've experienced really challenging, what some people would call bad trips. I mean, certainly the 30-gram experience would be, I don't think a lot of people come back from that. I was talking to Jamie Wheel, and He's like, that's an initiation. Like you either never do drugs again, or you jump out a window, or you decide I'm cool, I'm going to do this again.
Was the first reaction never again? Because mine was like coming out, I was like, okay, that one's good, I'm done. But as time goes on, the curiosity starts saying like, hey,
I didn't sleep for 1 minute that night. You know, like I said, it ended at midnight. I stayed awake, just writing and thinking about it. And, you know, it was never again for the first 4 hours coming out of it. And then somewhere around 4 a.m. before the sun came up, I was like, yeah, I'm going to run that back at some point. And because I had a greater awareness and appreciation for it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I wouldn't do it solo. I'd want, you know, a high level person there guiding, not just a sitter, but a true grounding cord, you know, someone who's not playing an iPod like I was, but somebody who can direct the experience like an Ikaro. And we can talk about why those, again, are more than just a song.
Well, that's my next question. You know, we'll jump into that. Yeah.
Okay. But I guess the point is that, these darker experiences, dark entities, why are they here? Why? I mean, we are in a land of duality, and we cannot say we come from God and God is all love. You wouldn't know anything. It's like, I forget the guy's name, but he did the, This Is Water. Familiar with that? I'm totally blanking on his name right now. It's a college commencement speech. David Foster Wallace. Okay. It's incredible. Watch the YouTube. Beautiful soul. He took his own life later on, but what he's talking about in that is if you're a fish, there's two fish swimming along, and they pass another fish, and the fish that passes them says, really nice water today, right, guys? And one of them's like, yeah. And then they keep swimming along past him, and then the other fish says to the fish that are going in tandem, what is water? Like, you're in the water, you have no idea that it exists, right? So if we're in this sea of love, or all consciousness, all everything as unity, as one, there's no way to know self. There's no way to know distinction without background. And again, Ishtak and Stalking the Wild Pendulum, I highly recommend it for people, especially if whether you've gone down the rabbit hole with psychedelics or not. It is very illuminating, and he doesn't get everything right. You know, he doesn't get psychedelics right. He wrote this in the 70s, long before ayahuasca came on the scene in the Americas, or in North America and Europe. But everything else on consciousness is flawless. And, you know, he's really speaking to that. You can't know it without background. You can't know it without contrast. That's the only way we experience. Like, the reason for duality is just that. And what Jung talks about, anything that casts light must cast a shadow. And so we talk shadow work and things like that from a psychological level. It makes sense that we have those things as a way to push back. We need resistance for growth. If I lift weights with just the bar and I do back squats every day, it doesn't matter if I get up to 1,000 reps. Eventually I stop growing, right? I have to add weight to the bar to continue to stress, or I have to jump with the bar or pick a new exercise. There has to be some novelty there to change up the resistance, so that I will have to learn to grow from that. And any of this resistance, if I'm consciously resisting, that's a whole nother topic, but the resistance that we get from life, from the external world, the resistance that we get from within, that's all by design. That's all here for our awakening. That is here for our growth. And one of the deepest downloads I've ever had on a ketamine journey was, why did God split us? Why did God create us? Why did God create a fractal universe if there was this all-knowing, omnipresent, all-loving, like, why do it in the first place? And the answer was to know thyself. And that's not for me to know. That's equally for me to know myself as an individual fractal piece of God created in God's likeness, as well as God itself. God can only know itself through just creating the different avenues of God, right? Exactly. Like, that is the only way for God to know God's self. And it's the same for us as well. So whether the goal is to traverse back up the ladder to make it back to unity consciousness or not, I don't know. But I do have a very strong knowing inside that is what we're here to do. We're here to learn. We are here to grow. We are here to expand our consciousness. And that does take resistance. So I think that loosely might fit to why there is darkness in the first place.
So then maybe saying, like, as you're traveling through the psychonaut sphere, these entities that you come across that are perceived as negative, is that random occurrence, or is there someone specifically that's going to reflect something back at you because you need that experience right now from that sort of teacher type being. You know what I mean? Because I'm exploring that whole space where people's like, oh, this entity came and it's sapping my energy, or like I've been screwed up ever since that because something possessed me. So like,
yeah, that's that right there. The way you're wording those circumstances to me is victim mentality.
Yeah.
You've already given away your power. If you're susceptible to somebody taking over you, or, you know, punishing you or zapping you or doing whatever the case is,
you're making an agreement, you think?
Yeah,
you think that's like they're agreeing to like, okay, I'm giving up my power. So there's sort of like
but even that, like, just to broaden that back out, if that's not what you're saying, and you're still saying, I'm still coming across these things, what is it there for? Is it random? Do I go so far into the astral or into the spiritual realms that, you know, any and all things are there, and just so happened that this negative energy was around me, and it really fucked with my head, and now I've got to unpack that for the next 3 months? Or are there no random circumstances? Is everything synchronicity? Is it possible that anything that I encounter in life, waking consciousness or otherwise, is there for me to learn from, to grow from? That has been my experience. And I don't think, I mean, there are no mistakes. Like, everything is a learning. You talked about that in Kung Fu Panda, you know, there really are no accidents. And those experiences, I would say that if you take the humble view of student and you ask, like, what can you teach me? And you might not get a great answer. You might still get pushback. You might get anything else, and you might have to unpack it later. But at least coming with that level of respect for whatever you come across, and understanding, like, this is not an accident. I'm here to learn from you. And looking at it that way from a humble viewpoint, you're going to find more answers than, man, this thing just came and took me over, or I don't know what happened. That was totally random and weird. Like, to actually unpack it from a student's mindset will help.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can't remember who said it, but someone was saying, like, every time you kill your ego, it's like a muscle. It comes back stronger. You know, it's like, yeah, now I'm going to do 50 grams of mushrooms, or like, you know, I want to push even farther to that point of that sort of almost like the resistance, where you had to find the deeper levels of resistance. So I forgot my train of thought now. So in this dark experience, yeah. So for me, for example, in the beginning, when I was going deeper with ayahuasca and just pushing myself, there was a level of fear there. And that sort of dissipated over time. So now it's like, I don't think any entity out there can touch me if I stand in its face and say, hey, like, what can you show me something? Like, at first it can be startling when you see this, like, you know, massive dark energy that you can't make sense of. Then it's like, wait a minute, like, you have no power over me. And that sort of dissipates. So yeah, so I've just been playing around with that and what that means, and like, where you think this takes place. Like, are these things happening all the time around you, and we can only see it when we dive into these, you know, deeper depths of different psychedelics? Or is it just, I'm now choosing to enter a space and now I'm going into that? What are your thoughts around that, specifically around like,
all things are existing in simultaneity. Everything is happening at the same time, at the speed of now, as Paul Chek says. That we know that's true. We know that's true for many reasons. And, you know, all we have to do is look at the spectrum of light and say, we can see, everybody learns this in science class growing up, we can see a fraction of the rainbow, but that doesn't mean the rest of the rainbow doesn't exist. Right? There's many spectrums of light that we can't see with our naked eye because we're tuned to this frequency. Graham Hancock talks about that. If we're a radio dial, we're tuned into one station that is the human frequency and the human experience. In altered states, whether it's through breath work, fasting, you know, the original vision quest the Native Americans would do with no food and water for 4 days, you know, to plant medicine journeys or psychedelics like LSD and ketamine, we're changing that tune, and our tuning fork is able to receive and perceive much more. Right. And I don't think that, you know, it's like if a tree falls in the wood and no one hears it, did it actually fall or did it make a sound? Fuck yeah, it did. Just because a human wasn't there to see it, like their birds heard it. The ground felt it. Vibration still occurred, right? And one of the things Ishtak talks about is all vibration you could call sound. So humans have, I think, 20 or 30 hertz to 20,000 or 30,000 hertz. He knows this better than me. So again, forgive me for messing that up. Then he'd be like, it's 2030 or it's 3020. We have a band of frequency that we can hear sound at. And we know other sound exists, from whales to many other animals on this planet alone. But if we know sound is vibration, we could say all vibration is sound. So if we give it that loose blanket and we look down into quantum physics at particles. Particles are particle and wave, and they go back and forth. And our consciousness can affect that. Mm-hmm. It has an impact on that, the observer, right? But once it's wave, it is now vibration. At the very most infinitesimal level, it becomes sound, and all the way up the ladder. And so when we think of it that way, does all that sound exist at the same time, even though I can't hear it, even if I'm not there to perceive it? Of course it does. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. So do all of these planes of existence, the multiverse, the multidimensional nature of reality, does that all exist in tandem as our own? Of course, unquestionably.
So someone's partying right now in the celestial, and we're just not there. We're missing out right now. It's just going on. And I guess the opposite is true for the darkness, going on simultaneously everywhere. Yeah, I love that analogy. That's a really good one. I got two more questions around the whole psychedelic stuff for now. Anyways, more will probably come up. The role of the shaman. So and traditional mushroom, I guess, ceremonies, I see them popping up. People are like leading them ayahuasca style. And, just for me, I don't know any direct people that have any lineage with mushrooms, even like 5-MeO, stuff like that. And I know you went on this most impactful journey of your life solo, right? And you said you would probably do it different next time, but, do you think it would have been different if you had someone there with you to hold your hand on that 30 trip? And how important is the shaman in this journey? Because I flip-flop on that all the time. It's like, do they play a role? Am I giving them power? Am I taking power away by saying, hey, I need this guide here, rather than, your example of a sitter, just making sure I don't like jump through a window and allow me to sort of go. And I think there's also something about having no one there and like just trusting yourself to say, hey, like 30 grams, that's unexplored territory. Anything can happen. And still going in and having the deepest experience. So anything you want to say around, the role of the shaman? Yeah, go for it.
This is an absolutely beautiful question. And it's one that I get a lot as well. I think when you're starting out, you always want people. And I mean, for the record, I hadn't done solo work for many years, and had done, I would never do ayahuasca solo. Let me first and foremost say that, and we can dive into why later. But in terms of, even when we're just working with psilocybin, those are all guided experiences for years before I started working with solo journeys. And Terence McKenna said the solo heroic dose of 5 grams and up is a really special experience because you are by yourself, because you're in darkness and you got to actually work through it. There's no safety net. There's no grounding cord. It's you. And there's benefit and beauty in that experience. There's benefit and beauty to the darkness. There's benefit and beauty to challenge, or what some people call a bad trip. All of those things are important and valuable tools. But day trips are really phenomenal too, right? And generally less challenging if I can just go for a walk or do some breath work, or, fixate on a mountain or a flower. And that can also pull me and direct me, right? Or maybe I just close my eyes with an eye mask and actually allow whatever's going on that I want to avoid. Maybe I allow it to transpire and actually work through that in a different way. All of those are correct. There's no wrong way in the container of ceremony. There are plenty of wrong ways outside of that container, right? And what I mean by that is, these things can be fun. Terence also said, people asked him at the end of one of his lectures, is there a wrong way to do psychedelics? And he said, yeah, if you don't take enough. And everyone started laughing. He goes, I'm serious. In the 60s, most people were out at, 30,000 people at Golden Gate Park listening to Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix, and everyone's taking a mushroom cap and one hit of acid and having some wine and smoking a doobie. And they're never really experiencing that. It's dancing, it's touching, it's making out, and it's all the medicines at once at a very low level, as opposed to, creating a sacred space, having an intention written, some form of giving that prayer up, whether it's through song or speaking it or tobacco or any of these practices that we see with indigenous cultures, to actually get that into reality here. And then, like I said, really, whether it's with other people or not, the noble silence, like paying attention to that. Like, I'm going to be in my space and you're going to be in your space, and we could talk after, but we're not going to be sharing. It's not Bob Costas giving the play-by-play during my ceremony. And even if I'm struggling and I need help from the curandero or whoever's at the helm, I'm not going to have a back and forth with them for 30 minutes either. I will respectfully bullet point what my needs are. Like, hey, this is really hard. I'm having trouble breathing. And then they work on that. Or this thing's coming up for me. How do I let it go? And then they work through the song to direct your experience. And so again, if everything is sound, if we play along with that, sound then takes a different role in what its potentials are. And something, you know, they talked about a very long time ago was the way the universe was created was through the logos. It was God speaking the universe into existence. And if we think of that, vibration was the first thing that emanated from the unmanifest. So we have the Tao, the unchanging. Think of it as limitless potential, and there's no light, nothing in form. The second we enter the form, there is vibration. The second we enter form, there is sound. And once that comes through, that has certain frequencies. And we know this from singing bowls to many different things that can help us enter a state of deeper awareness. And same thing with binaural beats and all these things affecting everything from a neurochemistry standpoint that science can now back, to some of the older things like chanting and oming and things like that have been practiced for thousands of years as well. Those all carry a certain frequency. So when an Icaros is sung to you, it is someone through intention, their consciousness impacting your consciousness, directing you through a song that they learned many years ago from the plants, from another form of consciousness, as a way to heal a specific issue that someone's working on. It's not oh, hey, here's a little ditty you haven't heard. Let me pull this one up. Like, it's like, no. This is the one that you need right now. You need Remo Caspi. You need something to come in and guide you through this. And it works every freaking time. And it directs your visionary experience. Like, I've had some of the most incredible visions based on what song was being sung and when. I mean, just incredible. I mean, yeah. I don't know why that would open up a whole nother can of worms, like talking trip report on that. But my point is that these are, and even if it's not an Icaro and it's done in the container of ayahuasca, you know, some of my mushroom journeys have been with some of the best musicians on the planet, and, you know, medicine men in their own right. And, you know, one of the guys in particular, you know, you could play any instrument, Native American flute, buffalo drum, didgeridoo, you name it, and a ton of other ones, Brazilian guitars, things like a sitar, play anything. And when he switched to the didgeridoo, like, it's like the entire vibration changed. Obviously the didgeridoo is a big vibration instrument, but I mean, it was like it was jarring loose anything that was not in resonance in my body, so I could lay there in peace. Any stickiness or achiness, or I just don't feel loose yet. I feel like it's kind of, I'm stuck in certain places. You know, you talk about clearing chakras and things like that, and I'm not going to disagree with any of that. But I mean, I felt pure. I felt like, okay, after this one, I'm good. Anything we want to do now, right? So, I mean, there are palpable experiences through that on any medicine when sound enters the equation.
It's interesting. I totally agree with you. Like, I actually started singing because of ayahuasca. I played guitar my whole life. I couldn't sing, if my life depended on it. And then in a ceremony, through hearing this little guy from Colorado, I didn't even know he was going to be singing. He busts out this voice, blows me away. I'm like, I wish I could sing like that. The medicine's like, well, have you ever sung about anything that actually meant something to you? Or are you just trying to like sing along the radio or try to be cool or whatever? And I was like, actually, no. And then I was like, okay. So I got home, got some medicine songs, some songs that resonated, and all of a sudden this voice came out of nowhere. And I think there's power in that for sure, and how it directs sort of the experience. But for some reason, like I'm very open to all this stuff, but there's still a part of my mind that's like the reality check. So trying to bring the skeptic in. So like, for example, let's just say, one of your earlier ceremonies, middle of the jungle, you go in and the shaman's like, I'm going to sing you some songs. I'm going to heal you. These songs are going to heal you. So in your mind, you're saying, oh, when he sings, it's going to heal me. So you're framing that already. And let's just say you go into a deep, dark space and he comes over and says, hey, Kyle, fuck, I lied. I'm not really a shaman. It's my first time. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm scared, but I'm going to try anyways. Do you think you're going to have that same experience? Like I'm purged, or now you're going to be like, what the fuck is going on here?
No, of course you wouldn't. Of course you wouldn't.
Even if the truth was he was a master shaman, but he just said, okay, let me just say this to him. What do you think would happen? Like,
well, I mean, in this example, right? in the what if scenario, if he was a true master shaman or a master curandero and he was just fucking with me, the moment he broke into song to align me back to resonance, it would be palpable.
You think so?
And
okay.
I would know it. I would know it from the song. I would know it from it changing my chemistry. I would know it from the palpable feeling. It would reset me. And any of that, I'd be like, I might even start laughing. Like, you fucking tricked me. You're the dude. You're the dude, right? Like, you fucking had me there for a second. Like, I would know instantly. And that is the thing, look, there's a lot of purple belts and brown belts out there serving medicine, blue belts and white belts serving medicine that say, hey, I spent a year in the Amazon and I got the best this and the best that. And, maybe they're playing from an iPod, maybe they're singing some songs, but maybe they don't have the same equivalency as somebody that's done it their entire life. Mm-hmm. And I've had beautiful experiences with white belts and blue belts. I've had beautiful solo journeys, but
that's sort of my experience too. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that you're going to understand on the medicine where they're at. That's not going to be hidden from you. And if you have any questions in your head, I've had my skeptic hat on too. I think a great book for skeptics, just on what this reality actually is called Walking with Bears. It's by Dr. Will Tagle. He has a PhD in physics and a PhD in psychology. He went to Caltech. Brilliant. Also has Native American ancestry and started working with the elders from a very early age. And he bridges the gap between modern science and ancestral wisdom in a way that I think is perfect for people to go. And then I've read a ton of different books from Native Americans. I think Lame Deer, Seeker of Visions is a great book. Black Elk Speaks, great book. But none of them speak to me the way this book does, because he has not only the Western mind that he's up against, but he has the scientific mind that he's up against. And he's a well-studied psychologist who studied Jung, studied many of the greats that I still find a ton of value in. And yet he's met with some opposition from the elders and in the way that they do things and in the way that they heal and in what actually is happening when we're on a vision quest, what actually is happening when we're in nature on medicine. And again, I think it's important to have, for many people, you're never going to fully eliminate that skeptic mind. It's there on purpose. It's a part of the personality trait that you took when you came into this form. And that's totally fine. Many people have an inner critic that is always on board, the inner judge that can be very strong in a lot of people. And that's okay too, as long as it's not the one driving the car, mm-hmm. right? As long as it knows its place. It's a part of the whole, but it's not the whole thing.
Yeah.
As long as that can still remain there, but it's heard, it has a voice and it's heard, but it's not the one that's steering the ship, then those things are okay to inhabit. It's always okay to be like, my bullshit meter's going off. I don't know if this guy's legit.
And it's the bullshit meter's more like towards myself in a way. It's like, once I started getting more familiar with ayahuasca and I get into the darkness, then I would just focus on my breathing, relax, and say, okay, like, am I being dramatic now? And just like rolling in my pain. It's like, wait, I can stop this. And now I'm just going to focus my energy. So how much am I in control here? We're not even about control, because I know the mind wants to be like, I want to be in control and let go. And it's like, okay, like, roll the shaman. I respect it. I know they can guide stuff. Is it necessary? Is it not? You mentioned specifically ayahuasca. Was there a reason why you said not solo ayahuasca? Like, is there a difference between the energy of that medicine and that? And like, so I'm very open, and I put a lot of, like, I love being guided and I feel the strength of that. It's like, how much am I giving it to them, or is it just, am I believing that's what it is?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think with any of these things, and you could say the same for, Kalindi's doses of psilocybin, when you're cracked that far wide open, I think it's important to have helpers. Let me just put it that way. Okay. That could have to do with dark energy. It could have to do with anything. I think it's important to have helpers. Certainly when you reach the potential of purging, you need helpers. I don't do, DMT alone or anything like that. Not because I can't, I'm a Zen monk. Some people roll around and do flash and all that. Like, I'm generally just laying there out of my body in an experience. But at the same time, people have been burned alive, on DMT from hot coils and things like that, so, it's good to have a sitter in certain circumstances. With ayahuasca in particular, like, you need more than one helper. Every experience that I've done that is the best experiences, there's been, I went down to Soltara, which is a phenomenal place in Costa Rica. I think they're
Dan's
reopening
place.
Here in September. Yeah, Dan Cleland, phenomenal
great
dude.
Guy, yeah, great guy.
They bring in Shipibo shaman in pairs. They rotate, every trimester. So you get, you can have different shaman and curanderos that you're going to work with. And, but they have at least 6 facilitators on hand, and 2 of them are apprenticing medicine people who've been working for at least a decade. I mean, they have every right to serve stateside and would be better than 99% of the people that are here serving stateside, yet they're still apprenticing. They're still trying to learn and get the black belt level, and they're there in the same room, able to translate to you whatever the curandero is saying. And you have the actual people from Peru, and you also have helpers that'll walk you to the bathroom. I mean, like it's top to bottom, full service. And when you're that vulnerable and you're that opened up and you can barely walk and you might shit yourself, probably a good idea to have somebody there on hand. In terms of like me, I don't enter into that space saying this person's going to fix me. I don't enter into any medicine journey saying this medicine's going to fix me. It's not. I fix me or I don't fix me. And generally the fixing takes place when I say, I don't need to be fixed. I'm not broken, exactly. Right? Like that's the first thing, right? I'm not fucked up. I'm not broken, but I do want to optimize. I do want to get a little bit better at certain things. I do want to have less judgment, more compassion. I want to be a more loving father. I want to do it differently than my parents did it. I want to take a deep breath and relax and not take on other people's energy as mine. And I don't mean that in like the dark energy sense. I mean that as my son just lost his mind and is going apeshit, and that has the ability to raise me up to a level where I might be like my dad for a moment. Or can I take a deep breath and reset myself and enter into this space of centeredness and then say, hey buddy, come here, and hold him for a second, and then talk to him softly and not yell. And from that, I am actually giving him a different way than I got. And in that, I get to bring him down. So it's not a pissing contest where I always win because I'm the dad, right? Like that's not the way either. So I mean, very real world practical ways that we access that, all through me taking responsibility and ownership over my state of being at all times, in the medicine and without.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest takeaway, is taking ownership, responsibility for, you know, the way you sort of be in this world and all aspects of yourself. Okay, last question around this. So like a lot of people ask me this question, you know, like, hey, you've done so many journeys, haven't you healed yet? What are you going for? Like, why bigger and deeper? Like what is it? Do you feel like you're seeking for something? There's something unresolved, curious exploration? What is it for you, Kyle, that keeps you pushing the envelope into these psychedelic or plant medicine experiences?
Right. So this is an excellent question. My sister asked me this once because she's never done ion. She's my only sibling, a year younger than me. And she said that, aren't you healed yet? And I just started laughing. You know, Kalindi spoke at great length about this. The difference between the high-dose psilocybin journey and other healing medicines, because he doesn't call the high-dose psilocybin journey a medicine, right? Like it's not, you're not broken. You're not trying to get fixed. You're not trying to get healed. This is for the people, and I should say that too. You should feel quite healed before you enter into high-dose psilocybin space.
Very good disclaimer.
Like
yeah, that's a
right?
good thing to point out.
That's a good prerequisite to have. If you've got some work and you know there's work, you know, play at the lower end of the spectrum and work your way up. Totally cool. And psilocybin is a healing medicine. You know, I mean, the first time my wife did 5 grams of penis in me, like that was a very healing journey, you know, in many ways from her childhood, and cannot be overstated. Like beautiful, beautiful work there. Ayahuasca, very healing. But when it comes to, you know, this, is there a need? And, you know, Kalindi says that, like at a certain point for the psychonaut, you might say, I'm healed. I feel good, but I want a different perspective, or there might be more to learn. Maybe I'm not a finished product. Right. And that, I mean, that statement in and of itself is the reason I keep reading at the rate that I read at. It's not there's no gaping hole in my mind that says, I don't know enough, I need to know more. There's a curiosity. There's a wonder and excitement that is being directed internally. It's not my mind that says, this is something I want to explore now. It's something inside me that says, I'm ready for the next journey. Or it's something inside me that calls me to, you know, read a new book. And with that curiosity, there is more to discover. You know, I will never be a finished product. I don't know that I'll do high dose journeys my entire life into my 90s, but you look at some of these people who are much older than I am. You know, Dennis McKenna's done hundreds of journeys with ayahuasca, and he gets the same question. And he says, I'll stop doing it when I stop learning. Yeah. I'll stop doing it when it stops teaching me. Right. Every time it's so unique and so impactful and so in its own experience that can layer upon and blend with some of the other experiences and share commonality, but it's its own deal. It's its own deal with its own birth of new ideas. And the thing is too, like, I don't look at these as experiences that, you know, we're always looking at linear time as a start and a finish point, right? Like, okay, I'll be happy when, or once I get the house, or once I get the promotion, or, you know, finally, when my kids are in college, I'll be able to fucking take a deep breath and garden and do what I want to do in life. Like, all of these things have a cap point, and then life changes past that. Psychedelics aren't that for me. You know, there's no, well, once I get this next ayahuasca journey, I'm going to feel pretty good about myself and I'll be good there. It's like a garden. It plants a seed that grows a tree that plants several more seeds, and it plants them in all avenues, not just among like, oh, here's, you know, 20 other journeys I'm going to do. Like, it might plant one of those seeds might be for a different journey, but the rest of them might be for a new practice. Like, I'm going to start yoga, or man, I really need to be diligent on this hot and cold because it's going to affect my immune system. It's going to affect my neurochemistry, and all the other crazy shit that's going out in the world won't really matter as much if I take care of myself. Mm-hmm. It could plant several other seeds on things that are completely out of my purview right now that I have no radar for. Like, dude, I never thought of this. That's a whole nother avenue to explore. And, you know, with that continual seed planting that's ongoing from these in all directions, not just psychedelics, there's always more. And that's the most fascinating thing to me about them, is that it's not just giving me knowledge on whatever's in front of me, whatever I write down on a pen and pad. It's giving me well beyond that. You know, there was a saying, you know, the first curanderos I worked with would say, you don't just, you know, it's like the Stones song. Sometimes you don't get what you want, but you get what you need in the experience. That's always been the case for me, but more often than not, I get what I need, and I get a hell of a lot more on top of that I had never even thought about. Yeah. And for me, that it's the stuff that I'm not writing down. It's the stuff that's not in the forefront of my conscious mind when I enter into those spaces that really surprises me and really makes me go, damn, there's far more here than I could ever really think about. And that gives me reason to keep doing it.
Yeah, I get it. You know, it's like you can read a book about love, and a beautiful book, and it makes so much sense, and it actually touches you emotionally. But then ayahuasca or plant medicine teaches you about love, and you say, wow, I could have read that book 100 times and never got the understanding that I was just shown about like what real, like, unconditional love really feels like and means. And going back to your previous point about like the fixed point graduation to happiness, every time in my life when I thought once I get that something result is going to happen, that's a lie. That's a lie we tell ourselves, I think. And sort of letting go of that and being more in the present moment and just being is like really where life is and has to be from. And stop lying to yourself. Like, if I just have that, it's just being, I'm not happy with who I am right now. It's something outside of me is going to like graduate me into this fulfillment or happiness. And I guess maybe ask one more question around your intention. And I get this question a lot too, is as you're in this space now of exploration and learning, like, do you have like very specific intentions? Like, hey, I want to learn about love, or is it like, I'm here to be open and just learn, like whatever I need to be taught? Do you direct that? Because you mentioned earlier how specific the rebirth was for you.
I do direct it. And this actually flows into frequency too. So not frequency like quantum physics or sound, but frequency like how often. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with any intention you have if the container is set, right? So meaning like if you're willing to hold noble silence and it's in your basement with a candle and some incense, that's good enough. Mm. I know plenty of people, you know, my good buddy Tate Fletcher, he always laughs. He laughs at intention. You know, we were speaking our intention in a journey we were going to do, and he just started laughing. He's like, it's so ridiculous you guys have these intentions, because it's fucking never what I say it's going to be. It's never what I say I want it to be. And that is completely true as well. Right. So he just says, let's see what happens. And there's a lot of people who say like, you know, when they enter, I'm willing to receive whatever is to come to me today. My buddy, Eric Godsey, who's also a coach in Fit for Service, is Jungian analyst, brilliant psychologist, brilliant kid. He's 28 years old. He's fucking amazing. He has a mantra, heal what needs to be healed, love what needs to be loved, and reveal what needs to be revealed. And that's his basic, other than what's alive inside him, that's his basic intention each time. And it's a beautiful intention. For me, it's 99% of the time what's alive in me right now. and it's okay to be like, life's perfect, I'm just going to see what's up. And then it's, oh, holy shit, shit's hitting the fan. Let me fix this. Let me see outside the box around all these problems that I have right now. Entering the space in either one of those avenues is amazing. They're great. And I've done both, right? They're absolutely great. But this just goes back into frequency, or how often you do it, right? And I think Jamie Wheal and Stephen Kotler talked about that in Stealing Fire, the hedonic calendar and things like that. And that's something I always used to laugh about. Like, I'm not going to plan quarterly, both equinoxes and both solstices. I'm going to have the 30-gram doses and the ayahuasca journeys. And then, in between that, I'll microdose, and this is my schedule. It's like, I like to be more spontaneous than that. And I also like to really work on the things as they're coming up. So it doesn't mean I can go on a whim out to Costa Rica. Like, that has to be planned. But generally, there's enough life stuff in the equation for me to say, I'm ready, and I'll plan that trip, and I'll put it down, I'll buy the flights, and I will start working. Outside of that, if it's a mushroom journey or Wachuma, and I have someone is, I'm gonna head to some place where it's gonna be available, I will start setting intention for that. There's been times where, it's been once a month I did ayahuasca for 6 months. There's been times where I microdosed every 4th day for 2 months with LSD. There's been times where I went without ayahuasca for 3 years and then circled back. It's ebb and flow. There is, I know I've talked about a lot of books here, but one of my favorite audibles is a series of lectures from Ram Dass. It's called Becoming Nobody. And it follows him around when he's in his 50s. And what's beautiful about this is he hasn't quite ascended to the Ram Dass who died last year. He still has ego. He still has to fight with the persona of Dick Alpert, the Harvard educator, and he's so illuminating on this. But he talks about, I think he was drunk or he was high on some medicine with Alan Watts. And Alan Watts tells him, you know what your problem is, Dick? Your problem is you've forgotten your humanity. You want to be high all the time. And he didn't just mean high on LSD or high on medicine. He meant high in meditation. Like, he wanted to be up there in the outer reaches. He wanted unity. He wanted to be a part of the all. And he was looking down on what it meant to be human. And I think that's what some people get into. That's part of the trick is, you come out of an ayahuasca ceremony or you come out of a mushroom journey and you're fucking beaming and you have this glow. And it's really easy when someone cuts you off to not get mad and flip them off. If you get fired, you're like, there's some deeper thing here that's going to be good. I can't see it yet, but one door closes, another one opens. It's easier to grasp that as the knee-jerk reaction, to just be in center and say, okay, I'm cool. I'm going to say yes to this. There's less resistance, more acceptance. And then over time, we start to slide back in, right? We get back in the groove of daily habits. We get back in the groove of whatever's in front of us, the work schedule, the kids, the this, the that. And as we become more human, we recognize I've lost that part of me that was there with me right when I exited the ceremony. I need to do ceremony again. And some people will keep putting the importance of that ceremony as the healing fact that allows them to operate on high. This is what Ram Dass was talking about. This is what Alan Watts pointed out to Ram Dass. And this is what Ram Dass was really, when he gets in, and of course, he wasn't working with ayahuasca. He wasn't working with some of these things he certainly wasn't doing 30 grams of psilocybin. I'm not getting high when I have 30 grams of psilocybin. That is deep work. If I'm puking in a bucket or shitting my pants, that's deep work on a physical level, as well as the mental, emotional level. That's not just, I'm going to get high with a bunch of people and to live in that space. There's work there. So that's the caveat. That's a differentiator between what Ram Dass was talking about. But we can find ourselves in a similar space where we're like, yeah, I'm ready for more. I'm ready for more. I'm ready for more. And I think that the clear line there for me is, how much time have I spent actually processing? How long have I actually, and have I actually, say it's been 3 months since the journey, and by linear time, that seems long enough for my standards to go in again. But did I actually put rubber to road? Did I actually do what was necessary? Did I start to implement the things, the downloads, whatever I received in that experience, and practice all of this stuff? that I
And
bring it into physical reality.
and
Those are the questions you have to ask.
do you have a process that works for you that you can share about what that integration might look like? Is it just like sitting and reflecting? Is it like using some of these other modalities like hot and cold to maintain that vibration?
Yeah.
What works for you that you can share, and like, you know, maybe some sort of little point form, or, you know, like however that comes across, like what works for you? Because I think this is what most people lack, and also most providers don't have the tools. Like in an ayahuasca ceremony, you go to the Amazon, they've been used to doing this for thousands of years in a community. So if someone's struggling, the community is there to sort of lift them up, give them insights, and go talk to the shaman, get some feedback. You go from like New York City to the Amazon, going back to that like energy there, probably can't talk to half the people, you know, like there's a huge fall off. And then most people will end up right back where they were within a certain amount of time, because they haven't changed their environment externally or internally. So like, what would you suggest, you think, is a process that works for you or could be applied to others?
Yeah, it's twofold. Number one, integration has to do with processing, right? So I'm not somebody who journals daily, but I always write down the trip report and I review it. And, you know, initially I used to write every fucking detail, like, and then I was served the second cup and it was thick like syrup, and my stomach couldn't, and it's like, no. So I get to bullet points, right? It doesn't need to be lengthy. It's not a novel. It's not a story that I'm trying to tell other people. It's for me. So what are the key takeaways? I write that down and I review that. And I can place it anywhere. I can place it in my room or my office. I can place it as a, you know, like people do Post-its to keep them on track. Like, oh, that, yes. And it draws me back into that, especially because I'm writing it in the energy of that medicine. The medicine's still alive when I write it down. I'm not writing during the ceremony, but immediately after, I'm going to write that down. That's written holding the vibration of the field I was in when I was in the medicine. So as I tune into that, I'm tuning back into that state of awareness. It's not going to make me trip, but it's certainly going to bring me back into that. Oh, these are the key takeaways. This does matter, right? Outside of that, like, how do we align our tuning fork? How do we create resonance? And there's tons of books on this. I mean, I mentioned Stalking the Wild Pendulum by Ishtak Bentov, huge. Walking with Bears, huge. Nature with a capital N is pure medicine. There is no two ways about it. And the more nature there is, and I mean that in two ways, the more natural it is, like an uninhabited fort or the Amazon itself, certainly going to be better than Central Park. But if Central Park is your biggest part of nature in New York City, Central Park is awesome. And you should be in that part of nature as often as possible.
Take your shoes off and touch the ground. And
yeah, I mean, that grounding, we can get into all that. Schumann resonance, no doubt. There's frequency there. That's a real thing. That is true. Bodies of water, also very important. Wallace J. Nichols wrote a book called Blue Mind. And one of the things he said in that is they can look and verify scientifically, even just looking at a body of water, whether it be an ocean, lake, a river, or stream, even just seeing that starts to change our neurochemistry to where we feel more relaxed. Why is that? Evolutionarily, it turns out we needed water to survive. And if you see it, it's calming because you know there's life there. It even extends further. If you're in a place that has lots of green, lush plants, that too is calming. And there's multiple reasons for that, but one of them is, you know, water exists in order for there to be green things there.
And I think biologically, if you've been through a drought or haven't had water, like I've done a lot of dry fasting for extended periods of time. And I could see how, like, after a couple of days, you're just like, okay, like I need water. And if you've gone through that extended, maybe in your DNA, it's like, that just gives you a sense of calm and security. Like there's water nearby. I don't have to find it, you know, because you might go on days without finding water, you know, like you don't even know where it is.
But it doesn't, to your point though, it doesn't matter if it happened in your life or not.
Yeah, it's in your DNA. It's in your code, right?
Yeah, it has nothing to do with if you've done a traditional vision quest or gone without water or any of that stuff. It has everything to do with what is inherently within us, what's in the collect, and even outside of the DNA, even outside of epigenetics, what is in the human collective consciousness, what is in the animal collective consciousness. Nothing survives here without water, right? So that importance is there. But getting back to, there's a daily practice that's very, very. It's you know, this is where optimization comes in. This is where all my work as a fighter and afterwards in longevity really comes into practice. And some of the key takeaways, because, you know, anybody that's been coaching for long enough will constantly run into the same question or the same issue. The issue is always, I don't have enough time. right? And if you have kids, you might experience that for yourself, right? I got 2 kids. We have a newborn. I don't have a ton of time. I can't just go to the gym for an hour and come back and jump in the sauna for an hour and do all the shit that I want to do. I have responsibilities and I have a job and I have all these other things. So what is the minimum effective dose, taking from the 4-Hour Body with Tim Ferriss? What is the minimum effective dose that I can receive benefit from each of these practices? And how can I pair them? Is there a pairing like fine wine and cheese that will allow me to extrapolate even more of the benefits, exponentially accelerate the gains or whatever I'm working towards? And the answer is there's a ton of them. If I have an hour in the gym and there's a sauna there, or like, you bear witness, we were supposed to be podcasting yesterday and my sauna got delivered. I got a sauna that I'm building in the garage and a small home gym next to it. If I work out and lift weights or do cardio and then do 15 minutes of sauna afterwards, it's going to compound the benefit. And it's not going to hurt what I did in the gym. It's going to compound it. And it's going to be like I spent more time in the sauna, probably because I'm already creating heat shock proteins while I'm working out. Well, now I can get a workout. And granted, I'm retired. I'm retired from fighting. I'm not a professional athlete anymore. They're going to train differently. And I'm not speaking to that crowd, that small sliver of the population. I'm speaking to most people. If you can do a small workout that gets blood pumping and get into a sauna for 15 minutes after, you're going to have a ton of benefit from that. If you can get into an ice bath for 1 minute at 40 degrees, it's going to have a huge benefit there. And these aren't things like, look, I'm fully aware the sauna is an investment. Even the ice bath, the way that I have it, is an investment. It's an investment either way. I used to have a horse trough. It was $60 every time I wanted to put ice in it, and a pain in the ass to lug it over. Most people aren't going to do that, and they're not going to do it frequently. If you buy a chest freezer, you can cock it and turn that into your ice freezer, into an ice bath. And you can keep it cold between 35 and 45 degrees every single day. And when it's there, it's convenient. So the other tool or tip is to make it convenient. Even if you just have a TRX or some wooden rings in your garage or a pull-up bar in between your door jamb, if it's there, the odds are you're going to use it. And it's got to be something you enjoy too, right? So it can't just be a Nordic track or some shit that's going to collect dust. It's got to be something you enjoy. If you enjoy it and it's in front of you, you're going to do it. We have foam rollers upstairs and downstairs because when I see one, if I'm hanging out with my son reading a book, I'm going to jump on the foam roller. I'm going to do something for my body. So again, I've been speaking a lot about physical training and things like that, but we know hot and cold does way more than affect fat loss, detoxing and stuff like that. It does way more for us. Rhonda Patrick's beaten the drum for years about lowering all-cause mortality, and all the studies they've done on Finnish culture and Nordic countries. From a health standpoint, very few things can match that. Wim Hof has really exploded on the scene, and not just with breath work, but with cold therapy in general. And there's tons of science there that changes neurochemistry, that enhances the immune system, and it can do it in a very, very short period of time, lowering systemic inflammation. Awesome stuff. Let's table the hot and cold. Those are daily practices. What else is a daily practice? Breath work. Breath work in any form.
I'm a huge proponent of breath work. I actually teach breath work. Yeah.
They all work. That's the thing. I mean, I know you have, say, opposite ends of the spectrum. Wim Hof, hyper oxygenation, where you're dumping CO2 and raising the oxygen levels, all the way to the oxygen advantage on the opposite end of that. CO2 retention.
I just interviewed Patrick the other day. Yeah.
Yeah. He's incredible, right? Incredible. Completely different breathing style. I mean, literally they're opposite. One is all the way in, halfway out on Wim Hof's side. And the other one is halfway in, all the way out, right? You're using the lower half, right? Both of those work. Both of those are necessary. And both of those do different things, but they all make you feel better. They all have the ability to change neurochemistry. And so we have to look at what our inputs are. There are stressors that we will take on as a part of life that I can't get rid of. That's fine. I do have free will in how I choose to address those. And the more centered I am, the more control I have over what I say yes and no to. The more control over I have if I have acceptance or resistance. Where am I on that line of polarity, right? The more I lean into acceptance, the better I'm going to feel. The more I lean into resistance, it's going to persist. I'm going to not feel great about those things that I'm constantly in my mind struggling about. And Ram Dass, fucking Buddha, they all dive into this very deeply, and there's a lot of wisdom there. So I just think, just having a handful of tools, whether it be breath work, hot, cold, any of these things. The beauty of breath work is you can learn it. Once you learn it, it's free. You can access it anywhere. On an airplane, wherever you're at, you have access to that. Movement is huge. Movement's absolutely huge. Paul Chek talks about this. The last 4 doctors you'll ever need: doctor, movement, any form of movement, walking, Tai Chi, lifting weights, running, anything that's moving. Doctor, diet. What are you putting in your body that actually really, really, really matters? It's a big one. Water, food, and all of the above. Doctor, quiet. Do you have a meditation practice? What's your sleep habit? Do you have sleep hygiene? Are you in bed at the same time every night and up at the same time every day? Do you sleep cold? Do you have darkness? All of that stuff matters. And then Doctor, happiness. It's not your job, it's your vocation. What is it that tickles you inside, that gets you up in the morning and is a fuck yes, this is what I want to do right now, and this is the way I'm going to start inching my way towards that dream of mine. How big is your dream? All of that stuff flows in, and relationships will flow into Doctor Happiness as well. If you've got all your 4 doctors in check, it doesn't mean you're not going to have life hit you with more stress. It just means you're going to be better equipped to handle it. Absolutely. And I think those are the daily practices that I really follow.
That's amazing.
Ceremony without.
That's great tips there. And I would say too, like when you're in your routine and there's that question that comes up, why am I doing this? This is struggling. Or if you're working out and it's painful, instead of, it's just, for me, it was a little shift in mentality. It's like, oh, I'm going to enjoy this pain because it's making me stronger. It's like, I'm doing it for me in this loving way of loving myself through that experience, whether it's the 17th minute or 20th minute in the sauna, where it's just like, Jesus, every inch of me, the door is right there. Nothing has stopped me from pushing. I was like, oh, I'm doing this for me, not to just like beat myself up, and this is going to make me stronger. And when I started doing that more, it became a lot easier to start like, hey, like, let's do this together. And I'm like talking to myself or something, but it's just that little shift in perception of like the experience. I know we're running a bit beyond the hour mark here. I'm thinking like we can wrap it here. There's so many questions I want to ask you, but I'm thinking maybe a couple months from now down the road, we can hop again and we can dive into some of the other questions I had for you. How's that feel?
We'll run it back for sure, brother. Yeah, we'll run it back for sure.
Because this could be another 3-hour conversation easily. We just got through the first main question. So I guess from here, first off, just like, thank you for sharing all that so openly. You know, you have a really good way with words. The energy that comes off is very open, inviting. Like you said, I can really see that student teacher sort of vibe you give, where you share from a place of authentic sort of experience and knowledge, and you're also so open to continue to learn. And like, those are the type of people that I love associate myself with, because I resonate with that myself as well. You know, like, I admit I know nothing in the greater scheme of things, but I'm so open to learning and sharing. And, you know, I think that being in service helps me to grow. And I know there's a whole fit for service conversation I want to have, but we'll save that for another chat in the future, if you're cool with that. Does that sound good?
Of course, brother.
Yeah,
for sure.
So I guess just to close here, you know, you mentioned a lot of books. If there was one you had to recommend to people that was mind-blowing to you, that just really stands out, 1 or 2, like what would it be? Like, that just really just like took you and said, holy shit, like there's something here that changed my life. Is there any that stands out?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few I've mentioned. So if you're wondering about the nature of consciousness, if you're wondering about, you know, frequencies, sound, those kind of things, how it impacts us, I think Stalking the Wild Pendulum by Ishtak Bentov is great. And again, for the psychonauts, what he's talking about with psychedelics is a bit dated, totally fine. He mentions that in the opening chapter, like, this is a working model, open to interpretation and open to contribution from others. If you've ever been drawn to Native American wisdom, walking with bears, you know, and really what nature is, what consciousness, not taking my word for trees talking to each other and things like that, but actually wanting to hear it from somebody who's, you know, as accredited as it can be when it comes to, you know, the Western model of education. Walking with Bears of Dr. Will Tagle is one of the best books I've ever read. If you are struggling with mindset or getting out of your head or life's problems, the Audible, you know, with Ram Dass, Becoming Nobody, is only 5 hours long. It's one that I've listened to and re-listened to many times. If you're wondering what you want to do with your life, probably my favorite book for that is The Lion Tracker's Guide to Life by Boyd Varty, Boydvarty. It's only 3 hours long on Audible. It's a very small book. It's like a book you'd keep on the toilet top. It's super small. It is brilliant. It's packed full of wisdom. He's a true medicine man. from the African bush in South Africa. Just incredible. And that's, those are things I'm drawn to as well. Like, is there a book I can read where I can take a chapter in and gnaw on that for a month and then pick it back up and it's like, holy shit, there's more here. Or is it so small that I can finish it on an airplane flight, right? Like those, and that many gems in one tiny little piece of wisdom like that. Those are the ones that stick out to me. And then for health, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy by Paul Chek, or The Last 4 Doctors You'll Ever Need, which is an ebook. Paul is, one of my favorite teachers. Even just listening to his podcast, Living 4D, there's a handful of podcasts I go back to, and his is one of them. He has brilliant people on the show. And he's so well-versed. It doesn't matter who he has on the show. He knows just as much as they do. Like he really does. Like I don't know anyone like him.
Yeah, he's definitely from a different dimension.
Some people have trouble, he definitely will qualify himself on podcasts and talk about the books that he has and things like that to verify his level of understanding. Just table that stuff, draw from him what you can. And there's so much to draw from. And he's a mentor of mine and one of my favorite people in the whole world. And there's a lot of medicine in what he's talking about. So again, if you enjoy podcasts, check out Living 4D, check out mine, Kyle Kingsbury podcast.
I was about to say that you got to check out Kyle's podcast. It's great. You got Paul Chek's on there multiple times too. And it's a great conversation.
More than anyone else.
Yeah.
More than anyone else for sure.
Oh, it's amazing. Okay. Last question we're going to end with. What are you excited about right now? Is there a personal project, something in your life that just really gets you up in the morning or something you're thinking about doing?
Easy. My daughter.
Congratulations. Yes, that's right. New dad.
She was born 4th of July on the full moon. Her name's Wolf. So no doubt that was going to happen. She's just incredible. And what's cool too, is that like we talked about, contrast, right? Anything that gives us a shade of difference really illuminates the other. And in having such a gentle, awesome little newborn girl, I really see the medicine in my son as well. Like, not that I had forgotten about him, but it's cool to see them, and there's enough space between them that it's like looking into the future with her in some ways, like, oh, this is a 5-year-old and here's a newborn. And I remember what he was like, and I had almost forgotten. It's almost like nature purposely doesn't let you remember all the struggle of having a newborn, so you'll do it again. But it's incredible. I absolutely, that is the thing I'm thrilled with. That is my focus, is my family for at least the next year. And then I'll continue to push and growth and maybe a book and all that other fun stuff. But in terms of my own personal branding and things like that, I'm really doing, I don't want to say the minimum, but I'm just getting by when it comes to that, and enjoying and learning still, and really focusing on my family. And that's been a beautiful thing to do, especially having quarantine and all this other stuff happen in the world, is just to really set my feet firmly in the ground here and enjoy the experience of being a dad and being a husband.
Amazing. Thank you so much again. Where can people find you? So your podcast, you have a website, you have social media handles. Where's the best place?
The website shit. I'll figure that out in a year, so don't bother there. It's Living with the Kingsburys, at Living with the Kingsburys on Instagram. It's my wife and I's joint account. She posts a lot, I post a little, but either way, we get back to people there. And really, it's the podcast. That's where you're going to hear the thing I'm most up to date about. I'm not too big on social media for many reasons, which I dive into on a later podcast, but it is, there are pros and cons to anything in life. And I certainly see that now. And that's why we have the joint account. It's a very fast way to communicate with people. But the podcast is where I'm putting, you'll find what it is that I'm tracking based on the person I have on. And, every now and then I drop a solo cast where I really dive into everything I've been up to and the things that are alive most inside me that I feel most important to talk about. And that's where you can take a deeper dive with me.
Amazing. Yeah, my wife actually follows you guys on Instagram. Like, yeah, I'm interviewing this guy, Kyle Kingsbury. She's like, this same Kyle? I was like, yeah, you follow him? It's like such a weird coincidence. Like, awesome. So check them out. Check out the podcast 100% and send Kyle some love, likes, follows, supports, shares. Thank you, brother. And I already got a list of questions for the next one. Whenever that happens, we'll line it up. But won't plan too far in advance. We'll just go with the flow, and looking forward to that as well. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in, guys. All the likes and support, shares, follows. Appreciate you guys. Love you, and we'll see you soon. Peace.